Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Vestanland. This is episode 36, and in this episode, I'm going to be building a highly detailed and customized transit hub for this new town on the west coast of Vestanland. You'll see by the end of the episode, this town does have a name. I got a pretty good suggestion from a comment on the previous video. You'll see I'll add some custom signs and stuff like that. But before getting into that stuff, I have to set up the station. Obviously, I built these kind of terminal tracks here earlier on, just kind of because I knew this is generally the area where I was going to build this thing. But I needed to do some work, kind of shifting things around, adding the platforms, and then thinking about how trains would access the station from the main line that's kind of goes further up the coast. You can see I kind of settled on having two main platforms here. As I've said before, I got a lot of inspiration for the kind of cargo and industrial area and also this train station layout from the city of Kristiansand in Norway. And I think you can kind of see this here. I mean, if you look at like the Google Earth image of that train station, it is kind of a terminal station where the trucks come in, they kind of fan out a little bit, and it kind of has a similar footprint to what I'm building here. Um, and yeah, as you can see, I'm using Move It in these kind of these platform networks, kind of shifting them around. I did a lot of kind of trial and error before I settled on something that I thought looked pretty good. And I also did, you'll see here in a bit, I do some work with like the traffic manager on the train tracks to make sure that there's a good route for each of these platform tracks. And yeah, again, this is not something I'm necessarily an expert in, but I think I was able to come up with something that's at least fairly realistic. Um, and yeah, as you can see, we've got it's just a double track main line coming in, and then it sort of splits out to these two main platforms. I really like how it turned out with having the one that's kind of closer to the harbor. You'll see this in a bit, but it kind of fans out by the end, which I think looks really cool. And then there's another thing when you're using these platform networks, it's super easy to just sort of like taper them at the end, which is something that's found at a lot of train stations, and I think looks really good. And it adds a lot of realism and something you can't do without these custom networks. And yeah, I mean these train station projects are always really fun to build. I really enjoy them. I'm always looking for an excuse to build another one in the series. And yeah, as you can see, the kind of layout is starting to take shape a little bit. Again, this is only a fraction of the trial and error that it took to actually lay out all of these networks here. And yeah, I cut it down. It still ends up being a lot because again, it took a long time to figure out what the optimal layout was, and then also how to factor in. I wanted to have a couple of sort of excess like siding tracks to kind of fill things out a little bit. And yeah, you'll see kind of the one closer to the road on the bottom of the screen is basically it's like I built it as a platform track, but it does not connect it to a platform. And I don't know. I imagine that's maybe where trains are kept overnight or something. Something I do have to build at some point is like a massive rail yard. That might be a project for a future episode. I'm not sure if that would be in this area of the country or probably closer to kind of the main population centers. But yeah, in terms of realism, that's something that I'm definitely going to try to build at some point. As you can see here, I'm just kind of shifting the nodes around to make sure they're kind of realistic radii for the curves, and these junctions aren't too sharp or anything like that. And yeah, as you can see, I also just making these platforms different lengths. While I'm not sure it's like necessarily practically useful, I think that also adds a lot of realism. And then I added these kind of disused tracks at the kind of top of the screen or closer to the harbor area. And yeah, I'm not sure what these would have been used for necessarily. I imagine it could have had something to do with maybe the cargo harbor. You'll see a little bit later on in the video that I add like a historic train station building, which I didn't really get a chance to explore very much in this video. I kind of this project kind of spiraled a little bit and went a little bit long. But yeah, I think I kind of added some old railroad tracks that kind of trace out a path kind of through the city. I'm imagining this. Obviously, this station is not going to. It's not super modern or anything, but it's sort of. I imagine it's maybe was rebuilt to add capacity or something, and there was kind of an older, smaller station that was a few blocks away. So these tracks that are they're kind of disused now, kind of point in that direction. So yeah, there's kind of a lot of different possibilities for what they could have been used for. Again, I'm not really sure, but regardless, I think they look really interesting, and it adds a nice detail, and again, kind of makes the scale of the station area a lot more realistic. Now I kind of have the platform shape kind of settled, and I'm happy with how all the tracks are kind of laid out. And then with this bigger platform, I decided to kind of fill in the space just by adding a little bit of a kind of, you know, generic surface, kind of tried to color match the to the colors of the platform networks, and then kind of filled it in, raising it to the same level. The way these platform networks work, they're modeled such that they kind of slope in towards the kind of drain pattern that you can kind of see if you kind of look really closely. So I kind of just added this wide like platform that kind of just sits at that drain level, and then kind of, yeah, I think nicely fills in that space, and kind of, yeah, gets that kind of wide platform that I was going for. Now you can see what I was kind of talking about earlier with kind of laying out. In this case, I'm just doing it with a kind of gravel road as a placeholder, but kind of getting a sense of where the older railroad tracks might have run at some point. And yeah, I'll get back to that a little bit later on in the episode. But before that, what I now need to do is get kind of the surrounding buildings that are kind of going to be at the front of this train station. Sort of, again, I need like this like street here between the train station and this row of buildings to be kind of complete so that the detailing doesn't look super out of place. As you can kind of see, I'm using more modern buildings on this area. I'm imagining that this area has probably been redeveloped since it was originally constructed, and I like having the contrast between the kind of modern buildings and the historic old town area. And probably the next episode, maybe the episode after that, I haven't really decided yet. I'm going to fill in the space between this project and the initial area that I built, and the challenge there is going to be to kind of blend this style with the old style. And yeah, I think once that happens, this town will kind of be it won't be finished, but that'll kind of have the all the sort of the backbone of it will be kind of completed, and I think it'll look really good. And yeah, you can see those kind of row houses I built there. I ended up just deleting those. Those didn't really fit what I was going for, but it kind of gives a sense of the type of buildings that might be in kind of that intermediate area. And yeah, something I'll revisit in a later episode for sure. In terms of the buildings I actually did place down, I really like that kind of modern corner building that kind of backs up to the highway. And then I found this angled residential building that I'm kind of splicing together with kind of just a generic office building. And I think this fits really well with the kind of street grid I've laid out. And you'll see a little bit later on, or you'll see right now. I spoke too slowly there. These are the old station tracks that I'm building, and I'm gonna kind of like move them around so that they kind of just like are just visible on the street. And this is something you see in a lot of cities where you have old right of ways that have been disused for a long time, and then the streets have kind of just been built around them without taking the rails out. Always something I think is pretty interesting. And yeah, you can see I use that kind of angled building as kind of a reference for where the maybe the old again the old right of way would have been. And I think that looks really cool. I mean, I don't again like this building obviously would not have been built there like fronting the train tracks, but I think maybe it just kind of represents where the old like property lines used to be or something like that. Regardless, having those kind of added details and added angles and stuff makes things look a lot more interesting, and I think it works pretty well. It's something I'm looking forward to exploring more in a future episode where I kind of revisit that old train station building, which I haven't placed down yet. But yeah, I also placed down that modern building, which I'm imagining is kind of maybe offices for the railway, something like that. I'm going to place down the actual train station building in a bit, but first, I'm going to kind of set up this area a little bit more. I'm thinking about kind of how the street grid should look realistically based on, again, kind of the different uses of this land, like before what's there now. And obviously, I set up these kind of more major roads that are like usually two lanes, and then kind of have the one way alleys kind of going in between. And then this road here is going to be just kind of tracing the path of the old rail line, and yeah, it kind of breaks the street grid. I think it looks good. Now I'm actually getting into placing down the train station buildings, both the current one and the historic one. This one here, that's kind of the old, kind of the red brick one, is what I'm going to use for the current station building. I have to just convert it to procedural objects and then kind of extract just the building model out of it and then kind of, place that exactly where I needed it. Um, yeah, in relation to tracks and stuff like that. And you can see it kind of fits perfectly in this little area. Yeah, between the kind of the more modern generic office building and the freeway and bike lane highway type thing. Um, and yeah, I like this. I like the look of this building. It's I don't know. I don't think it's modeled after an actual place, but it's in the workshop. It was, I think the creator of it was inspired by something, at least vaguely Northern European, which is again kind of what this series is mostly based on, I would say. You saw I just sort of covered up the name that it came with, and we will get into by the end of the episode, as I mentioned earlier. We'll get into what the new name of this town's going to be, and yeah, I'll replace those signs with the updated name. Now I'm just sort of fiddling around with this office building, kind of again fitting it into a bit of an awkward shape, which is obviously really easy to do with procedural objects. Um, yeah, I think that kind of has a nice contrast between both the industrial zone and the historic station. I think that kind of building is something that's really important for kind of establishing that transitional area between the different places. Now I'm doing the again, this is what I was talking about earlier, the historic train station building. This one I think is based on a German station somewhere, and it looks a little bit older. And yeah, I think this. I'm not really sure. I haven't decided yet what it's going to look like, but I think this is like a prime candidate for like maybe it's been turned into like a community center or a museum or something like that. And I think this will probably represent kind of the edge of the historic building style that I kind of started in the old town, and kind of from that point towards the modern train station, it's going to kind of transition between the old style and the new style. Obviously, that's going to be kind of tough to do in a really small space like that, but I think I'll be able to pull it off, and then once that kind of works, it'll look really good and kind of establish what this town represents and what it sort of is going to look like overall. Now I'm getting into the actual like nitty gritty of detailing this transit hub area. As you can see, I converted this stretch of road to the curbless roads, and then I've added these little like bump out things which come with that curbless road pack. And these are, I mean, it's kind of tricky to use again because this is like a slightly elevated, like it's not quite flat, and it's kind of a confined space. But with all the tools that we have now, especially the node controller, and you'll see a little bit later on the intersection marking tool, it's at least doable to do these like really custom areas like this with again doing things to the nodes that like aren't really supposed to be done, at least in the confines of the base game. But yeah, again, with all these new tools, there's something that's possible. You can see at least I was kind of fiddling around with the bus line tool and trying to like I was just making sure that like the bus lines could actually access this little like jut out thing. And you'll see I end up adding two of them. It took a long time to figure out how to connect the nodes in like the best way. I'm not really sure I did, honestly, but it looks like you'll see by the cinematics at the end, the buses do kind of go in and out of these bus bays fairly realistically, and that's kind of all I needed to have happen. Um, yeah, the nodes when you sort of click on the node controller and look at them, they kind of they look a little bit wonky and it looks a little bit weird, but the finished product I think is good enough, and yeah, that's kind of all I'm going for at the end of the day. Yeah, you can see there, just like again, I had to just completely start over a couple times just to, it got a little bit too crazy. But yeah, converting the nodes to the freeform mode is something I don't really do that often. I don't have a ton of experience with it, but again, it's really the only way to do like a super compact kind of set of segments like this. And yeah, once I did that, it made it all possible. And yeah, it just kind of made it possible to straighten things out and then kind of again detail around them, which you'll see a little bit later on. Before I start doing all the detailing work, I did want to make sure that this bus line would be functional, at least all the segments would connect and stuff. By the end of the episode, it's kind of unfortunate, but I didn't like the citizens don't really have any reason to go there, especially since this railway station isn't actually connected to anything anywhere else in the map. But yeah, I also did a little. I made sure that the bus line at least will connect to the that bus station I built in the downtown area, and yeah, I think the this town I'm imagining will have like a pretty robust local bus network, and yeah, I'm excited to see. I think that that'll kind of be the main mode of local transportation, obviously. Um, because and then this railway station will be primarily for intercity trains, and then yeah, again, that's kind of be the hierarchy of how the transportation infrastructure will work. And you kind of see that as the series progresses for this area. Anyway, in terms of what's going on in the time lapse, I'm now diving into the intersection marking tools stuff, placing down these decorative curbs. Again, I'm using the curbless roads, so I don't have to deal with the slight like elevation differences and stuff like that. But again, having the intersection marking tool to add these custom curbs in these like very specific locations and have them all line up is definitely a game changer for building stuff like this. Um, you'll see I'm able to connect the curbs again to this like bus bay, and then have kind of again have like the buses like follow it exactly, and it's just yeah, it makes it possible. Um, and you can see there like, it's a buses coming in, and you'll see right here. Yeah, that's not what I wanted to have happen with the with the buses. I mean, I had to rework things a little bit. Um, again, yeah, it's it's important to do like the stress test and like have make sure the infrastructure is actually working as intended before like going through all the work and placing down all the details. Because if I'd seen that after I was done, I would have been obviously very disappointed and had to like pretty much start completely over. But luckily, I tested it out and got it fixed. I don't know, I'm not really sure even what was wrong with it, to be completely honest. But it ended up working out in the end, which is what matters. And yeah, now someone actually got off the bus on that occasion. I'm not sure why, but um, yeah, again, now the all of the the networks are working as intended, and getting back into the detailing work is possible now. I mean, I'm just confused about that pedestrian there. I'm not sure where he was going, but yeah, and then I actually ended up having somebody's waiting for the bus here. Again, I'm not really sure why, because there's no reason. There's like no like jobs or residences here at this on this side of the city yet, but I don't know. It's good to see. Good to make sure that the bus stops are working, at least within game. I did have a little bit of trouble, or now we can see the bus come into the bus stop, and oh, you'll have to wait till the end. You'll have to wait to the cinematics to see it work perfectly. Um, anyway, yeah, using the traffic manager to kind of set up the different routes for the vehicles. You'll see I end up changing the like T intersection kind of in the middle here, so that cars can't turn left there. It's just gonna get too confusing with how I was gonna interact with the buses. This is what I was talking about setting up the bus line to the downtown area. I did a little bit, sort of redetailed a little bit of that area. Didn't show it in this time lapse just because it wasn't, specifically related to the video. Yeah, I did that, and it looks pretty good. Now I'm going into again intersection marking tool, using the just fillers to kind of mark off these bus bays, and yeah, putting down some decals and stuff like that. Yeah, that's what I was talking about, kind of not allowing those left turns. And this will make things a lot simpler in terms of blocking off traffic from the bus line to the bus bays, I should say. And yeah, I kind of added this row of bollards, kind of just going down the center of this segment of road. I think it looks pretty good. I added like you'll see a little bit later on, I add like kind of a wide, solid line under these to kind of really establish this as a barrier. Um, yeah, I think again, there's not like a ton of population or people or traffic going through this area, but I think when that does happen, I think traffic should flow pretty smoothly, um, or at least it shouldn't be a huge problem. This is what I was saying with the again making this like a really established barrier, and yeah, you can see the buses have like a little place to turn off, and then they can come back in without having to worry about cars coming in from the other direction, which again would just be, I think, overly complicated. And again, it's a pretty compact area of the city. I mean, cars can like go one street over to turn left, and should not be a huge problem. Now I'm getting into this is where the intersection mark tool didn't quite work on these little corner things, for whatever reason. So I just used PO and converted one of these pavement decals to like a red color that kind of matched the color I'm using for the bus only areas. In terms of the traffic flow, again, just kind of using the decals to mark things out. As I've said before, this series is really about doing like all of the like really small details that come, especially with like complicated intersections and stuff like this. So yeah, adding like road arrows and stuff is like probably something I wouldn't have done maybe in earlier episodes just because it gets kind of overly complicated. But in kind of a smaller scale city like this one, it's something I can do. It's a little bit more manageable. You saw I added those little plant earth boxes there. Again, converted them to PO just so I could customize the size so they kind of fit perfectly in that little spot. Kind of again, kind of stops. I mean, obviously this is in city skylines. Citizens don't actually do this, but in real life that would stop cars from like accidentally turning into the bus lane and messing things up. And yeah, I think those look pretty good. Add a few little bushes and stuff to kind of brighten up the area a little bit. And you saw I added a little bit of those all the road wear markings and cracks and stuff. Trying to get the pavement texture to look as realistic as possible. Um, which again is not doable necessarily if you don't add all the really little details that you might not necessarily think about, but are really important for kind of coming together to create a realistic looking scene. Now I'm using the intersection marking tool again to add the bus shelters with the glass and the frames. These are the same ones that I've used in other areas. Um, Again, they look really, it's obviously super easy to customize how they're laid out and then convert and then like just copy and paste to a different area, which you'll see I do on the other bus bay area. I also had to use decals for that crosswalk there because that particular segment of the road is just a segment. It's not a node, so they don't allow crosswalk markings on it. So again, had to kind of improvise a little bit there. Anyway, now I'm adding the bus bay signs here, just 1 and 2, simple. Again, using a PO'd, some like road sign of some kind. Yeah, I mean, I've said this before in other episodes, other videos, but adding the signs with procedural objects is like probably my favorite small detail to do. It really makes things look like realistic and alive. And yeah, speaking of that, now I'm adding the name of the town to the train station. It's called Christianshaven. Again, kind of just, and that's Christian's harbor, I guess, in a number of languages. But yeah, I think that's, again, I'm taking inspiration from the town or city of Kristiansand in Norway. So that's kind of a good ode to that a little bit. And obviously, this is a harbor town. So yeah, I think a fitting name sounds cool to me anyway. And that's the name of the town. Um, Speaking of the name of the town, I mean, I'm sort of obviously I'm not, I don't, at least realistically, I'm not going to be able to build every single town that would exist in a country. This is at least not. I wouldn't be able to model them all in the game. So yeah, if there's any like other town names that you think would sound cool, I can like kind of just like file them away and kind of maybe just like add them to road signs and stuff just to kind of at least create the illusion of there being more on the map than I can realistically build. Yeah. Anyway, I'm getting back into like the sort of really small details I was talking about. I'm happy with how this turned out, adding this kind of like custom pavement texture here, kind of a little bit randomly. I mean, in all honesty, it's just like how it was easier to place down the procedural objects like squares, and then kind of using these like sort of more old like weathered curves to kind of mark it or like distinguish it from just the pavement texture. Again, a lot of this, like sometimes I do detailing stuff like this, and maybe it looks kind of random, and oftentimes it is just because it's not necessarily realistic. It's just like what's easy within the confines of the game. Especially, I mentioned this earlier, but it's these types of projects are a lot more difficult when the ground isn't perfectly flat, which it isn't here, and that kind of distinguishing like texture I think looks really good, and it kind of sets apart the station entrance area from like maybe the more modern like things that have been replaced more recently, and they're kind of just kind of all the same kind of pavement texture. Um, yeah, again, it was sort of harkens back a little bit to the historic train station building. I like having areas like this where you kind of see the history within the infrastructure. I think it looks really cool. I'm now, you could say I went over to that kind of like bike parking lot area and kind of copied and pasted a section of bikes. Obviously, this area is like super convenient to access by bike just because it's next to the kind of nationwide cycling network. So obviously, I imagine a lot of people would ride the bike to the train. So it made sense to provide a little bit of an area for people to store their bikes there. I'm now using the same technique for the sidewalks, using that platform network thing that comes or you can use with the decorative networks tool and intersection marking tool. Again, kind of unifying the different sidewalks kind of throughout the area, throughout the city. I haven't really decided yet exactly how I'm thinking. Like, I don't know. I'm not sure if those are like the new sidewalks that have been replaced more recently, or if they're like supposed to represent more historic areas. They kind of look like maybe more modern. I don't know. Maybe like a modern interpretation of like a cobblestone type of thing. So yeah, I imagine it's honestly probably like that's probably just like the more modern built things that the city probably consciously wanted them to all look the same. Um, yeah, anyway, I'm just kind of thinking out loud with that. Now I'm getting into detailing the actual station complex itself, which again is kind of the thing I enjoy doing most about these projects. You saw me I had to level out the platforms with the station building a little bit, and then now I'm moving on to adding these kind of platform shelters. Again, these are the same ones I used at the Norbakken station. I think they look really good. They're simple and they're a good asset. And you'll see on this one that's like a little bit wider, I end up doubling the like number of like station or platform shelter things, and then converting them all to procedural objects and kind of shifting around the vertices so that I don't know. I think I'm really happy with how this little area turns out because I don't know. Kind of like I like how it kind of like I guess I'm not really sure what the word for it is, but it kind of tapers off to like kind of mirroring the platform. And yeah, again, I'm happy with how it turns out. And yeah, you can see here using the procedural objects mod again is a game changer for stuff like this. It makes it super easy to line things up, and yeah, just having the ability to like really fine tune stuff like this. I think it's what I've said this a million times before, but it's what I love most probably about where City Skylines 1 is right now. Just yeah, being able to do this stuff is something you can't really do anywhere else, at least at this scale. So yeah, again, makes projects like this possible, and I'm super grateful for it, of course. Now at the end of the platform here, yeah, I kind of just tapered off this one side and then kind of stretch out the other one to kind of mirror kind of the way the platform networks look at the end of the platform, and yeah, just doing these little like making sure everything kind of lines up just perfectly so it looks good even when you're super zoomed in. Yeah, I would definitely encourage you guys to stick around for the cinematics at the end of the video, because I think they ends up turning out really cool, and yeah, you can kind of see this whole area really come together. I'm definitely proud of how it turned out. So yeah, again, encourage you guys to stick around for that. Now I'm getting into kind of the final phase of detailing the stuff, just like adding all the tiny props and stuff that go on the train station platform. I'm using the same pack that I've always been using. Again, I mean, there's no reason to change what's not broken. These benches and trash cans and stuff, they look good. They look modern, and I like having kind of the unified look across the different train stations. I think that's also something that's really important across this whole series, just having one consistent design of stuff like that. It kind of yeah, it makes sense because it's one country, and it's kind of it's kind of just how the real world would work with projects like this. And yeah, on this wider platform, I ended up kind of like changing the layout a little bit, having the benches kind of like being on those kind of like where those drains are, and having the trash cans kind of in the middle. I think that's another, yeah, again, kind of just like tweaking things around to kind of um, fit with how the kind of everything else is kind of come together. Obviously, I built the platforms. It's not like I'm building this like to a real life situation, but I think sort of just operating in that way with building these cities is the way that I can make them look the most realistic. Just kind of operating as if the decisions I've made in the city are kind of like mirroring how the station or city or whatever it is would have developed. historically. I think that is kind of a good way to think about it. Um, and yeah, sorry to sort of wax philosophical on you guys at the end of the video. It's been a long one. I know. Appreciate you guys for sticking around as I kind of place down the signs, and again all the like little more of the little details that kind of make the station come alive. Um, yeah, I added the station name. I added these like little like display things that kind of hang off of the uh, station shelters. And yeah, obviously this is like a 4-track station, so adding the different track numbers, stuff like that. Again, it's another little thing that kind of makes everything come together. I mentioned a little bit earlier that this is kind of a longer video, and I think that's more of a factor of just like it's been kind of a little bit hectic for me in terms of like having time to edit stuff and build in the game. I'm hoping that in the new year I should have a little bit more of a consistent schedule for uploading things. So hopefully videos will be a little more consistent. And yeah, hopefully it's kind of, at least that's one of the goals that I have going forward. I hope to make a little bit more progress consistently in the series. I'm also planning on leaning into like again like the actually like designing maps and stuff. I've kind of just gotten started on building like a countrywide transit map, just like in Inkscape. And yeah, hopefully that'll be something I can share with you guys at some point in the future. And yeah, I mean the last part of the video is going through and adding all of the like rail yard details. And again, this is not like I've sort of mentioned this before, and I mentioned this when I built the Nyrstad Central Station. I think that was in episode like 8 or 9, and obviously I'm using all the same kind of pack of props from the Railway 2 pack. And again, this is not something, I mean, I don't know exactly how all this stuff works, but based on what I've seen from like again like Google Maps and stuff, I think I did a decent enough job. I added the catenaries for this double track segment. I added the middle ones. They're not interfering with the platform, which I realized those like kind of ones at the sides would have done. And yeah, I'm adding the catenaries for all of the electrified segments. And you'll see I add these like these like weeds here on these disused tracks, which again I'm not sure exactly what they're for. I think they look pretty cool, and yeah, if you guys have been watching the series, that's usually good enough. Um, and yeah, I mean that's another thing that's been consistent throughout all these videos is just adding these like natural details, adding bushes and weeds and shrubs and stuff like that is oftentimes the final piece of the puzzle for creating a really realistic looking area. And I did a lot more of that here with just like having the like grass kind of growing through the fence and stuff like that. I mean, that's kind of again the stuff I'm able to do at this scale, which is always really enjoyable for me. I also added these little like buffer things at the end of the rail lines. Again, trying to check all the boxes for what would this like area would need to actually function in real life. Yeah, I think it looks good enough. I'm happy with how the project turned out, and again, adding and just a few like bushes and stuff. It's oftentimes all it really needs to kind of tie everything together. One of the another thing I do have to do is add the pedestrian pathways to kind of at some point animate these platform areas and make them usable for people. Again, I sort of mentioned this earlier, but unfortunately at the end of this video, like no one has any reason to go to the train station because it's not connected to anywhere else at the moment. Obviously, like within and like the kind of lore of the country, it's connected to the rest of the things I've built so far. But yeah, again, just like limitations with my computer and the game and stuff, it made more sense to start this new map just with this city on it to kind of save on performance and stuff. Um, but yeah, you'll see by the end, I do end up actually like running trains through here again. Like it looks really cool in the cinematics, and yeah, I think at some point I'll try to build another station. Maybe it might just be like a dummy station that's like just to kind of for people to go to, basically. But yeah, I'll probably try to do that at some point. You can see here I'm adding those rail lines that I mentioned before, and again, these are just to have trains running into the station. No one's actually using them right now, but yeah, again, hopefully that changes at some point. When I was doing the cinematics, I realized I had a couple more details like the traffic lights, and you'll see, yeah, I had that little like electrical box there, which I think looked cool. And then I added a couple of signs, just like some of the default ones. Um, but yeah, a little bit of roof detailing on this office building, and that kind of completes the video. Again, stick around for the cinematics that are upcoming. They're looking pretty cool. And yeah, again, I appreciate you guys watching the video, sticking around to the end. I really appreciate it. If you want to get more involved with the channel, you can always, yeah, make sure you're subscribed. Check out the links down below. I'm not really posting on Instagram anymore, but yeah, check out the Discord to get more involved with the series if you want. And yeah, that's going to be it for me, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.